Hello and welcome to 11FS Spotlight. I'm Benjamin Ensor. In this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and brightest in the tech and financial services industries to try and understand what gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Louise or Lou Potts, Banking Customer Advisory Manager at SAS. How are you doing today, Lou?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well. I'm a little bit chilly. It's been a cold start to November, and I've just put this thick jumper on because I was it was a little bit cold in this office.
The de-icing of the car has been not a welcome addition to the morning routine, I can say.
Yes, winter mornings in the Northern Hemisphere. So on today's show, we're going to talk about your career and take a deep dive into the work that you're doing at SAS. And also really think about how can you transform and improve customer experiences and meet customers' needs through data, through better insights, and through action.
Yeah.
Before we start, can you give a 1-minute sort of elevator pitch for SAS, which is spelled SAS for those people? So for people who don't know it, can you give us a 1-minute elevator pitch of what the company is and what it does, please?
Yeah, of course. So kind of at a big level, we're all about helping companies turn data into intelligence to be able to use that to make good decisions, be that in any industry or for the good of the planet and society. So, helping save the Amazon rainforest and things like that. In terms of financial services, it's about helping banks make banking simple, safe and rewarding for everyone. So understanding your customers, being able to personalize your interactions with them, being able to meet their needs in a relevant, timely and contextual way to help them with their financial lives.
And can you tell us a little bit about your role at the company? What do you do?
Yeah, so me and my team look after our banking customers in the UK, and we work with them to help them take that data and that insight and apply that to help them meet their customers' needs, be that delivering brilliant experiences, be that keeping them safe from fraud, protecting them and optimizing processes and all those sorts of things. So really just helping them solve all their everyday business problems.
And what led you to where you are today, and what's your favourite part of the job? I mean, because there's an element of statistics and statistical modelling, and what you do. Are you a mathematician? How did you get to where you are?
I am not. I'm quite an oddity in customer advisory, actually. So my background and my degree, if you like, what I did in higher education is psychology. I then joined SAS actually in the marketing department. So I used to do event management, campaign management, that kind of thing, but working with our financial services customers. As part of that, got to do quite a lot of account-based marketing. So with some of our really big customers, a lot of the customers I work with today, working with them directly. And then I ended up sort of by accident moving into customer advisory as a way of spending more time with those customers and really helping them solve their problems. So sort of quite accidentally, but it's a great job. It's very interesting. I like that we spend a lot of our time solving problems, and it's focused on helping our customers fix their problems to deliver great things for customers. So, helping, it sounds very grandiose, but helping make, banks make the right credit decision to help people get a loan to buy a house or to buy a car, or, protecting people from, falling victim to fraudsters and things like that. So I think that's the rewarding bit of the job. It's the sort of problem solving and knowing that you're making a difference, kind of, even if it's a little bit detached in the real world.
And is the psychology useful? Because as you're thinking about why people do things and how to maybe persuade people to do things that maybe are good for them but they don't want to do them. I mean, does your psychology background ever come in handy?
Maybe subconsciously. I guess I don't kind of I don't think about it directly, but yeah, I think it ties in with that understanding people, being interested in people, and I think it probably is rooted in there somewhere. But yeah, it's interesting. Oh well, a different background, I guess.
So let's talk a bit more about the sort of the bigger picture and how you're using sort of data to try and improve customer experiences and help customers, help your bank clients meet customer needs through sort of better data and insights and action. Can you tell us a little bit about how banks are using your software and your services to make maybe faster decisions, to sort of make use of real-time intelligence? Can you give us a couple of examples maybe to bring it to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's all about kind of bringing that data together, and that sounds really easy, but actually isn't as easy as people would think, or isn't being done as often as people would think. But I think there's lots of different things. So it could be, for example, a classic example is kind of credit card and debit card fraud. So real-time payments, and should those be allowed based on a customer's previous behaviour. Now that's quite table stakes, I guess, in a lot of banks, but that's sort of an example. Things like helping customers to engage with their customers, so based on activity that people do on websites, for example. So how do you use that to tailor and personalize an engagement with a customer? We're working with a digital bank, for example, in the Nordics, around that, purely digital bank, to do that. Working with some of our customers in the UK, understanding unstructured data, for example, to then improve customer interaction. So one of our customers, through analysis of web chats, was able to realise there was a whole heap of traffic that was being pushed to email that was unnecessary, just by changing some of their back-end processes. They were forcing sort of 25% of queries to be pushed out into another channel. So people wanted to chat to them over web chat, and they were pushing that into another channel, and actually they could have left that in the channel it was, just by changing some back-end processes.
How are they? Can you give us a bit more detail? I really appreciate you may not be able to reveal who the client was, but what were they doing that was driving people to email? Because if they come into the chat, presumably the people wanted to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a UK building society, and it was to do with processes. So they didn't understand what customers were asking for, or they were pushing them to a channel, and actually they found that through using sort of natural language processing on that unstructured data, they could go, all right, well, this is what people are contacting us about. If we did this instead, they wouldn't need to contact us. A very kind of, I guess, an example that makes that a bit more human maybe than just, I'm asking a web chat about some information. We did some other work with a big UK bank around root cause analysis. So why do people ring and complain, and why do they contact banks to complain? And they'll come in, they'll give a reason, that gets marked as the cause, and everybody goes off about their day. An example that one of my colleagues found was people were, someone had rung up to say, I've had a direct debit declined. And so that goes down as a declined direct debit. That's why they're complaining. When you actually look into what they were complaining about, they'd asked for a power of attorney, a number of weeks previously. That hadn't happened. Unfortunately, the relative they were asking for that for had passed away. And so then a lot of money and expenses that come with that situation were being taken out of their account, and that's why they'd missed a direct debit. So actually the problem isn't that the direct debit is declined. The problem is your power of attorney process is broken or is not working, and being able to kind of react to things like that. I guess an example of where it doesn't work well in terms of surfacing a decision, personal example that I've been through: applied for a mortgage with my bank, was declined, got a mortgage somewhere else, absolutely fine. About 6 months later, bank reaches out to me and says, oh, would you like to come and talk to us about a mortgage? We see you have this monthly payment going out to a mortgage provider. And it's kind of like
6 months later.
6 months later, and it's like, well, no, because you've said you won't give me a mortgage, so don't offer me a mortgage. So I mean, that's an example where it goes wrong, and what we're doing with customers is helping them go, okay, we've had this communication with a customer, they're doing this on our website, they're doing this in our app, we know this from their transaction history, this is something we should engage them on, or this is something that might be relevant. Another area that's quite interesting, or where you can you can kind of see real potential for this is around collections and recoveries, and customers that might potentially be moving towards financial distress. So there's a huge wealth of information in the data that you hold on your customers. And if you can mine that and you can understand that, then you can potentially spot indicators that a customer may be moving towards financial distress. And we had a customer that did this, and they put in then some interventions and were actually able to reduce people that went into a financially stressed situation or into a collections and a recovery situation, which, if you can stop people going there, that is hugely beneficial for the customer. It's also beneficial for you as a bank from a selfish point of view, but from a customer point of view, that's so much better that they don't end up in a stressed situation. And it can be simple things, like spotting an increased use in payday loans combined with increased online gambling. Now, those two things on their own are not necessarily indicators of any, financial stress or anything like that, but combined with other data that you have about that customer, you might say, we want to take a closer look at that and we want to see if we can help that customer. And like I said, that it might be absolutely nothing, but it could be an indicator that that person is maybe heading for a situation that is not going to be good for anybody involved. So, yeah.
It sounds from some of what you were saying and some of the examples you were giving there, it sounds as though you're using elements of artificial intelligence in
Absolutely.
some of this. So you talk about natural language understanding and so on. How much of your capability is sort of advanced in the last sort of 5 to 10 years? What's the role of artificial intelligence in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been doing things with analytics, with machine learning since the beginning. It's become obviously significantly more prevalent, and a lot more noise is being made about it in the last couple of years. And I think customers are looking at how they can use it more. One of our UK building societies and banks, again, looking at how can you use machine learning to create more accurate models around credit lending, for example. So how do you identify people that maybe you would have rejected, but actually with a more accurate model or a more accurate understanding of their situation, they are actually perfectly, within your risk appetite to lend to. And equally, does that open up more things? And I think it's the data mining and those advances, but it's also things like image processing, natural language processing, deep learning, or all these words that everybody bands about. And I think it's finding the right place that they fit. They're not always appropriate for everything. But I think the biggest thing that we've really focused on is explainability. So if you're using those things to make decisions about customers, what are you doing? What is driving that decision? And do you understand that? So, it's the artificial intelligence, you sort of need those two things side by side so that you can explain what's happening. And I think that's becoming a really hot topic at the moment around ethics, around the use of data and artificial intelligence. That's, there's a lot of talk around that area at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to get into that scenario where computer says no. So let's just dig into that one on the lending, because it's super interesting. Yes, you can use artificial intelligence to help build better models and machine learning and so on, and look back at past patterns and so on. You can also use new data sources. But you made the point at the beginning about how it sounds obvious just getting all the data a bank has, and of course it's not obvious at all. And the data is in all sorts of different systems and so on. So presumably there's a lot of work that you're doing with the banks to help them pull all of their data together into sort of data lakes or whatever, into a way where you can actually access the data. And presumably you're also looking at bringing in third-party data in some instances as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we kind of we sort of work with pretty much any and all data. So wherever that customer data is, whatever data the bank has, for example, or financial institution, and we can help them bring that together from different sources and data quality, dedupe, all that kind of thing, but also just bringing it together into analysis. But you could absolutely combine that with open banking data. It's just another source of data, or even open data. So I think it's hugely untapped, but a very simple example would be, could you take weather data and land registry data and mortgage data that you've got about your customers, plus transactional data that might indicate they're trying to become more eco-conscious. They're paying for an electric, they put in an electric car point, they are moving to shop more locally and things like that. And could you combine all of that information and maybe say, well, they would be a good candidate based on weather and location for things like solar panels. We could, they are showing that they would like to be more eco-conscious. We could help them with a loan to enable them to make that step. Now, that isn't going to be relevant for everybody. It's not going to be of interest to everybody, but that shows how you could maybe use data that you wouldn't typically have used, or you might struggle to think of how you could use, that's available to enrich what you understand about your portfolio, about your customers, about everything.
Can you get all of that type of data? I mean, can a bank get all of that data about a person? Obviously, they have a lot of data because they can see they can see each of our transactional data. My bank can see what I've spent money on and so on. Can you get all of those sources of data about individuals?
So I think there is, some of this is around open data. So it could be that you look at future, sort of weather and, more, area data, ordnance survey data, for example, and that gives you some geographical information combined with customer data that you've got that obviously you have to use within, the data regulations and within the permissions that your customer's given you. And so, it isn't always possible for banks, but I think there is a lot more that banks could be doing. And I think even if you look at, we talked a little bit earlier about unstructured data. The wealth of data that is in web chats, emails, forms that customers send in, notes from call centres. If you could use some of that, like call centres, if you could process that in real time, could you help direct a script that would enable a call center agent to have a far more productive and valuable conversation with a customer? Could you redirect that individual to speak to somebody else in the call center that might have specialist information that the agent that they're speaking to doesn't have? Now, that requires you to have the data, be able to analyze it and be able to action it in real time, but it's possible. It's just bringing it all together.
Can you tell us a bit more about that sort of journey from data to insights to action? Maybe with another example. So, because you were talking earlier about how you were using, I think you were saying you were talking about using data from a website. You could, seeing which pages someone had been on a website to probably predict which products or know which products they're interested in, and then personalizing some of the messages. Can you talk a little bit more about how do you do that? How effective is that of using these sort of clues that I as a customer have given to then change the messaging or change the products?
Yeah, so I think, it's about, capturing that data. So if it's on a website, for example, we've got things that will collect data as you kind of travel around a website. So what are you clicking on? What do you look at? And, that can be, obviously, if you log in to a bank's website, we know it's definitely you. If you don't log in, there are some probabilistic things that can, we can, make a best guess and things like that. And you can combine that with data that about customers. So if I log in to my bank's homepage and you've got my and I've got a current account with you, you've got my it's about stitching that together and saying we know that this individual is on the website doing these things. And it might be that triggers a personalized communication that's relevant at that point in time. So, if I was looking at loan information and maybe looking at T's and C's of a loan that I've already got, probably the thing to, you might bounce up something about a loan or personal loans or things like that. But equally, I think it's about knowing the messages. It works both ways. So it's knowing the messages not to surface. Again, personal example, I've got a current account. I am forever getting pop-ups in my mobile app for personal loans. For small personal loans, I have a linked savings account that's got an equivalent amount of money in that they're offering me a loan for. And it's like, well, and it sounds silly and it sounds ridiculous that you kind of think, well, it feels like that should all be stuck together and maybe that isn't the thing to offer me. Now, if I'd been on the website, if I've been on the mobile app and I'd been looking at loan information and I'd then gone onto the website to look at T's and C's, and I then rung the call center and said, oh, I'm looking to restructure some finance, and I think it's just being a little bit smarter about a lot of that data is there. It's just pulling it together and using it in an intelligent way at the right time and in the right channel. And sometimes that is to do something for a customer. Sometimes it's to stop another department sending a communication or having an engagement that actually isn't going to help that customer.
I'm tempted to ask you who your bank is,
I'm not gonna share.
I know, because you've already told us you applied for a mortgage, they turned you down, and then they tried to sell you a mortgage 6 months later when they finally woke up. However, I think the deeper point you're making is that there are banks that really haven't thought about their data strategy. They really haven't thought about the data they're sitting on. They're not really doing very much with it. There's a perception in the industry that some of the fintechs are just much, much smarter about data. They're using data more effectively. Mm-hmm. But of course, actually, the banks are sitting on tons of data if they could just use it. I'm curious, are there firms you're working with that that are really good examples of using the data in an intelligent way and doing some great things with it? And I don't know if there's any you can name that where you can say these firms have done some good things, or maybe you can point to some of the sort of ways in which they've thought about how they use their data. They're almost like their data, their insight strategy.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth saying, that I think some of the fintechs and newer entrants to the market are doing this brilliantly well. They don't have the same estate, the same legacy, the same complications that maybe some of the more established players have. And I think there are in lots, in all of the customers we deal with, I think there are pockets of fantastic stuff that's going on, as well as it could be done so much better. I think in terms of things that are being done well, I think, some of the web chat stuff I talked about, some of that root cause analysis. So how do you really help customers when they make complaints? How do you really understand? I think some of that stuff is really good. I think some of the things that's being done, I was chatting to a colleague earlier today about this, and actually coming on here and we were talking about kind of cases. A great use case that's just come out, not in financial services, but I quite like it, is 1-800-Flowers. So they're a huge US gifting company. You can now communicate through a personal home assistant, so like an Alexa or something like that, to order flowers, get recommendations for gifts, that kind of thing. And that's, again, using some of that natural language processing stuff in the background. I think that's really clever. I think some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier about, banks that are using artificial intelligence and machine learning as part of credit lending decisions, what that enables them to do in terms of who they can lend to, I think is taking huge steps forward.
I was very interested in a point you made earlier about explainable AI, and trying to make sure, I know we didn't go into it at the time, but trying to make sure that any decisions that are made by a machine are explainable. Yeah. How is that working? Are you managing to use AI in ways that are explainable?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of things that we're doing. So within our technology, we have things, so using AI to do things like automated explanation. So to help, part of this is about helping the whole organization as well to be data literate and to understand this stuff. So we have capability that will allow you to look at things, and that will give you a common sense, if you like, explanation of this is what it's doing, this is what's driving it, this is the most important variable. And then we've obviously also got that with kind of the far more sort of statistical classification and all that stuff that statisticians like, that tell them how accurate a model is, what it's doing. But yeah, we're able, within the algorithms and the modeling techniques that we've got, to be able to say, well, these are the things that are driving that decision. This is what, this is why the answer was the answer that was given, and that's hugely important. in financial services, but particularly in areas of financial services, credit is a great example. If you give someone a loan, you have to explain why you thought they were a suitable candidate. If you decline somebody, you have to explain why did you decline that person, and you need to be able to remove things like bias. So you need to understand what's going on in that model so you can remove bias. We all know the infamous card that that was making decisions that had a very clear gender bias in it, and if you don't understand what the model's doing, you don't understand that data is driving it, and it might be, obviously there are protected characteristics you can't use, but actually, do you understand that there might be something in your data that's actually acting as a proxy for that you don't know? And I think there's also, if you take that a step further, so it's not just the what the model is doing or what that analytics or that kind of smarts is doing, but it's also when you are looking to deploy that into operational systems and you're looking to deploy that in front of customers, again, within the capability we've got that sort of surfaces those decisions, we can tell you in a decision at an individual level, so what fired, what rules fired, what models fired, what decision, what analytics were in there that made the decision show this offer, agree they can have a loan at this rate for this much, and you need to be able to understand it and explain it. And yeah, it's kind of embedded in all of our latest capability, and it's something that SAS take very seriously, around data ethics and usage of that. We've got a new team that's been set up in the US that is focusing for the whole of the company globally, but it is focusing on that and how we get better at that, and how we help the whole, it's not just about us, but how we help everybody in the data science community. What should that look like?
I think that's really important. You mentioned, there have been a few scandals. Scandal is perhaps slightly too strong a word, but
mishaps.
Unfortunate instance. There's another question I really wanted to ask you, which is that these technologies are incredibly powerful. I think some of what you can do is amazing. It's really, really quite something. When banks tend to see this technology, they often tend to say, "Oh, good, we can use this to sell more effectively," and so often these technologies are employed to personalize the loan offer, to personalize the mortgage offer. Even the examples you were using from your own bank, which I'm surprised you still bank with, were mostly sales examples. Have you got examples from your client base of companies that are using this to help people make better financial decisions, even if those decisions maybe not in the immediate financial interests of the bank, where the banks are sort of maybe helping people to manage their spending more carefully? It's helping people avoid getting into debt traps. You mentioned sort of gambling and a couple of other things earlier. Have you got banks kind of using this technology for good to really help customers manage their financial lives better?
Yeah, I think, an example I really like is, again, one of our building society customers that are using us to help them with things like APP, so the kind of application push payment, that sort of area of fraud. And they've got a really nice example that they talk about, which is someone that was looking to make quite a significant transaction, had actually put that through, I think in the purchase of a new house or something, and the bank had picked that up and kind of gone, this is a bit of an unusual transaction, and then they'd having access to police data and things like that, had seen kind of weren't sure it looked quite right, had reached out to the customer and said, are you sure? Are you sure this is a payment you want to make? Are you sure the details are correct? And it turned out they weren't. And that customer was able to stop that transaction, and that stopped them becoming a victim of fraud. And I think anything around that fraud area that kind of helps protect customers, particularly, APP is quite a, there's been a lot of debate about that because of who's liable with the money and all of that kind of thing as kind of, going on the side. I think the collections and that sort of money management area and really understanding what customers are doing, being able to spot indicators of financial distress. Now, they're no guarantee that customer is going to hit loan difficulty, they're going to hit financial struggles, but if you could intervene, as I said, a customer of ours that intervened and was able to put in certain things, so when they see certain behavior on accounts, they're able to kind of reach out, and they've got very subtle sort of interventions. But actually, if you can stop a whole group of people actually getting into debt, and you can engage with them early enough, you can help them restructure, you can help them self-cure, is another thing. And I think COVID has really brought that to bear with things. There's talk about, some people are financially much better off. There are, significant swathes of people that are significantly worse off financially. And how do you help people, and not everybody wants to speak to somebody, and sometimes that's part of the problem. So can you offer through intelligent ways of communicating with people? Can you give them methods, for example, that allow them to self-cure, so they don't necessarily have to speak to an agent, but you're helping them get out of a difficult situation? So I think using the data, the analytics, and the kind of action piece, if you like, which is, the data and insight, is all very useful. If you can't action that at a point that a customer needs it's the value's a little bit limited. But I think, particularly things around that collection, financial distress, vulnerable customers as well. We have customers that are using, the data and the insight to identify vulnerable customers, so that they can then engage with them and treat them in a way that helps protect them. And I think all of those things are really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's brilliant to hear, because I think that's the real power of this type of technology is to not only, to potentially, help the bank's commercial interests, but also to protect the vulnerable customers, to protect people from debt that they can't afford, or spending that they can't afford, so that you maybe don't end up with so many customers talking to the collections team, because people avoid getting into that kind of problem debt in the first place.
And if you can kind of pull all of that together, if you look at that very holistically, for example, so if you make the best possible credit decision at the point that somebody asks you for credit, if you can make the best decision there, and you can actively manage that account in a way that looks after the customer, can you then you reduce the number of people that get into a collections and a recovery situation, which is not anywhere anybody wants to be. And so actually, if you look at it holistically, and again, this comes back to that, bringing all of that data together, looking and treating your customer as the individual. They're not a series of products, they're not a series of services, they are a individual customer. And if you use everything you know about them, you can make all everybody is fine, can find that rewarding. Everybody can benefit from that within the whole kind of ecosystem.
Exactly. Better outcomes all around.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So we're coming to the end of the show, unfortunately, which is a shame, because I'm really enjoying this. As we end, I want to wrap up by asking you one last question, which you can answer however you like, related to fintech or not. What advice would you give to your younger self?
So I think it's that sort of being open to how you look at the world, look at opportunities, look at all sorts. So I ended up in the job that I'm in pretty much by accident, and because I happened to work with some people, I thought that looked quite interesting, was lucky enough to be able to get a chance to try and do the job, and I'm still here. But equally, I think if you look at financial services, there is so much change and there is so much opportunity. I think if you can think slightly outside of the box, if you maybe don't stick too much to a plan, obviously there have to be plans, but I think being open to what else you could be doing with sort of what's at your fingertips and what's available to you, both from a kind of personal job, sort of industry, but also, if I look at the customers that we deal with, the potential, if you can kind of seize it and use data in a different way, if you can think slightly differently, I think is huge.
Love it. So just before we finish off, what's next for SAS? Have you got things in the pipeline? Have you got new things coming? I mean, obviously.
Yeah, so I think it's continuing. We've we've done a huge move over the last couple of years into being kind of completely cloud native and all of that, of really developing and focusing on the sort of the artificial intelligence and expanding what we've got even more, the explainability and everything that comes with that. I think so collectively that's sort of a big focus for us. I think me, my team, everybody that I work with banks, it's about, again, helping, continuing to use data, use insight, get that in the hands of the people that can make a difference to their customers, to just keep driving sort of personalized engagements with your customers that are really valuable to everybody, and that sort of continuing of helping make banking kind of simple, safe, rewarding, all of those things. I think is certainly in our team that's what we're really focused on.
I like that. Simple, safe and rewarding.
Yeah.
Love it. This has been a real pleasure, but unfortunately we're coming to the end of the show. So thank you, Lou, so much for joining me. Where can people find out more about you and everything that you and your team are getting up to?
Yeah, so the best place is LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, just Louise Potts, SAS, should be able to find it. And yeah, we post lots of stuff on there, take an interest in what's going on in the industry as well, and links out to, some of our industry experts and things like that. So yeah, that's probably the best place.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, that's all that we have time for this week. Please make sure that you follow 11FS on LinkedIn and Twitter so that you never miss an episode. And go and visit the 11FS YouTube channel if you're not there already, where you can catch up on previous episodes. Have a great week, everyone. Goodbye.